3:45 a.m. Al Dhafra Air Base, UAE. Take a long, hard look at that silent night sky, because in just a few heartbeats, it is about to transform into a massive, panoramic crematorium. 52 lethal streaks of fire have just breached the horizon from across the Persian Gulf. Tehran has just committed an act that history will remember as a collective suicide note, launching a full-scale ballistic and cruise missile strike against the United States' most critical military stronghold in the Middle East. The strategists in Tehran are celebrating. They believe they have engineered a 21st century Pearl Harbor. They dream of 15,000 American casualties, of F-22 Raptors, and B-2 Spirit stealth ghosts reduced to smoldering scrap metal. A saturation attack they believe no defense can withstand. But there is a brutal truth that their arrogance has blinded them to. The very second their first missile cleared its launch rail, the countdown for the existence of Iran's entire military capability began. America does not panic. America does not negotiate. While their warheads are still mid-flight, the God's eye of the U.S. Space Force locked onto them in exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds for the death warrant to be signed. What you are about to witness is not a fair fight. It is a technological purge, a display of power so brutal, so cold, and so absolute that it strikes terror into the soul of any adversary. 48 minutes. That is all the time required to turn Tehran's pride into smoking craters. 1,250 American precision weapons versus 52 solitary missiles. The result? Irreversible annihilation. Welcome to Operation Steel Requiem, where we teach the world the cost of challenging the absolute wrath of the American superpower. Don't look away, because this is how a missile empire is erased from the map in less than an hour. Before we get into the video details, please let me know which country you're from in the comments. Now, let's begin. Look at the map of the Persian Gulf and find one name, Al Dhafra. Located just 32 miles from Abu Dhabi, this is not merely an air base. It is an impregnable fortress, the ultimate symbol of American power in the region. Housing over 15,000 military personnel, Al Dhafra is home to the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing, a gathering of true monsters of the sky. Here, 36 F-22 Raptor air superiority fighters stand on constant alert, ready to shred any flying object within seconds. Alongside them are MQ-9 Reaper squadrons, lurking from the void, and B-2 Spirit ghosts that occasionally visit as a reminder of silent death from 50,000 feet. To the strategists in Tehran, Al Dhafra was like a thorn embedded deep in their flesh, a symbol of dominance they craved to overthrow at any cost. And at 2 a.m. on that fateful day, the Iranian Supreme National Security Council convened an emergency meeting. In the closed rooms of Tehran, delusion reached its peak. Under the pressure of suffocating sanctions and the overwhelming presence of U.S. carrier strike groups, they made the most insane decision in modern military history: to execute a full-scale saturation missile strike against Al Dhafra under the cover of darkness. Their objective? Not just runway damage. They wanted a massacre. They wanted to see thousands of American soldiers dead. They wanted to turn the pride of the United States Air Force into a graveyard of high-tech scrap. The commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, believed this would be their Pearl Harbor moment, a surprise blow under the still of the night that would horrify America and force them to flee the Middle East forever. A laughably naive assumption. By 3:15 a.m., 8 strategic missile facilities across Iran began to stir like predators preparing to pounce. At the Tabriz base, 10 Sejil 2 long-range ballistic missiles stood vertical on their launchers. At the Bakhtarin military complex, 12 more Shahab 3B missiles were ready for ignition. Isfahan contributed 8 low-flying, evasive Sumar cruise missiles. Shiraz prepared 10 massive Khorramshahr 2 ballistic missiles, and at the Shahrud Space Center, 12 highly advanced Khaybar-Shekan ballistic missiles were in position. A total of 52 warheads, a cunning mix of long-range ballistic missiles and low-altitude cruise missiles featuring different trajectories and speeds. This was a textbook saturation attack. Tehran calculated that, by launching simultaneously from multiple locations, they would paralyze American defense grids, causing interceptor computers to freeze and clearing a path for death to touch the ground. At 3:40 a.m., just 5 minutes before launch, the commander of the IRGC Aerospace Force stared at his screens and arrogantly declared, "This strike will change the world order. The Americans will suffer casualties they haven't seen since World War II. They will leave our lands on their knees." A laughably misplaced confidence. They believed they had the winning hand. They believed these 52 cards were enough to checkmate a superpower. But they forgot one thing. America isn't playing the same game. America wrote the rules. Imagine you are an Iranian missile commander. You have just pressed the fateful red button. You watch with triumph as tens of tons of steel and high explosives tear through the night, believing you have dealt a lethal blow to the American giant. But what you don't know, or perhaps choose to ignore due to a severe lack of military intellect, is this. The very millisecond the massive heat bloom escaped the exhaust of a Sejil 2 missile, your fate was no longer in your hands. At exactly 3:45 a.m. in Earth's orbit, the SBIRS infrared satellites of the U.S. Space Force did not blink. These God's eyes do not need anyone's permission to see death sprouting from the Iranian soil. Within exactly 4 seconds, I repeat, a mere 4 seconds, those tiny heat signatures on radar screens in command centers in Colorado and Maryland were confirmed as a large-scale missile attack. Tehran believed they were playing a game of hide-and-seek, but in reality, they were standing naked under the floodlights of a space superpower. Automated algorithms instantly analyzed trajectories, speeds, and impact points. The result flashed on command screens in a single breath. Target, Al-Dhafra. Count, 52. Time to impact, imminent. The surprise Tehran expected evaporated by the 5th second. The battle hadn't even begun. But the death warrant for every Iranian launcher had already been drafted. While Iranian soldiers were still busy cheering their successful launch, the stillness of the dark night at Al-Dhafra was shattered by the most chilling sound a service member can hear. The air raid sirens wailed, not for a drill. It was the roar of a giant that had been awakened. Incoming ballistic missiles, all personnel to hardened shelters. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. 15,000 people, from F-22 pilots to logistics staff, had only minutes to race against death. They did not panic as Tehran had imagined. They moved with a discipline forged through thousands of hours of training. Billion-dollar aircraft were rapidly pushed into reinforced concrete hangars meters thick. Underground bunkers were sealed shut. But make no mistake, America does not just run and hide. While the personnel sought cover, the steel guardian gods at Al-Dhafra began to stir. Patriot battalions, THAAD systems, and C-RAM batteries began to slew their mounts, locking onto the black dots screaming down from the edge of the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds. What is the difference here? While the adversary is still using targeting systems derived from the Cold War era, America has activated an interplanetary defense network. With every passing second, American supercomputers perform billions of calculations to assign targets to each interceptor. This isn't war in the traditional sense. It's a data processing problem where the final answer is always the humiliating failure of the attacker. At 3:47 a.m., the skies over the UAE began to shake. Not from the impact of Iranian missiles, but because a volley of interceptors began to leave their rails, etching powerful white streaks across the night sky. The hunt had begun. Tehran has played its best cards, but they fail to realize that before them stands an impenetrable wall of steel, erected from the depths of deep space. Hold your breath, because what happens next is not a Hollywood CGI production. It is the pinnacle of precision-killing engineering. At 3:50 a.m., the skies over Al Dhafra no longer belonged to the stars. They became a massive meat grinder of steel and high explosives. Under the oversight of supercomputers, a technical massacre began to unfold in vivid detail. The first layer of defense, THAAD. This is the peak of American military arrogance. The THAAD system doesn't need explosives in its warhead. It destroys targets with a direct, centimeter-perfect collision at the edge of the atmosphere, using pure kinetic energy. Look at those 10 massive Khorramshahr, 2 missiles, things Tehran dubbed city destroyers, plummeting at Mach 14. But the AN/TPY-2 radars had them locked in an electronic vice from thousands of miles away. Whoosh, whoosh, the interceptors screamed into deep space. The result? Head-on collisions turned the enemy warheads into atomic dust at an altitude of 150 kilometers. An absolute humiliation for Iran's defense industry. As the remaining debris and mid-range missiles like the Sejil-2 entered the lower tiers, the Patriot PAC-3 MSE battalions began to speak. These are weapons designed with a single purpose: hit to kill. 32 Patriot missiles etched lethal white streaks across the night sky. The enemy's Shahab-3B missiles plunged like blinded beasts, banking on illusory luck. But American AN/MPQ-65 radars had them locked in an electronic vice from which there was no escape. One by one, Tehran's pride was being converted into smoldering scrap metal before it could even glimpse its target. And let's not forget the sneaky ones. 8 Sumar cruise missiles were trying to hug the terrain, slipping through radar gaps. A pitiful effort. High above, F-22 Raptor Ghosts were already waiting. Armed with active electronically scanned array, AESA, radars, and AIM-120D air-to-air missiles, American pilots were conducting what amounted to target practice. Every Sumar cruise missile was blown out of the sky over the water, their fragments sinking into the Persian Gulf along with the ambitions of their creators. By 3:56 a.m., the battle entered its most breathless phase. The final 6 warheads had reached the terminal defense zone. This was the moment for the C-RAM phalanx systems to show off. Listen to its roar. Brrr! 4,500 rounds of 20 millimeters lead per minute. 4 C-RAM systems created a dense wall of metal, sweeping away everything in its path. It wasn't defense. It was a sentencing by maximum firepower. No matter the effort, the disparity in quantity could not compensate for the inferiority in quality. 52 missiles launched, 49 shredded into dust. The result? A fuel depot in flames and 2 transport aircraft slightly damaged by interceptor debris. 15 American personnel wounded, with 0 fatalities. Tehran had hoped for a massacre, a history-altering event, but the only thing they received was an expensive lesson in military mathematics. 52 Iranian missiles were nothing more than buzzing flies before a grizzly bear armed to the teeth. Their saturation attack failed miserably against a defense system they aren't even qualified to understand, let alone bypass. And now, as the Americans brush the dust off their shoulders, the true wrath has officially begun. In American military doctrine, there is an unalterable rule. You never get a second chance after daring to fire at Uncle Sam. At 3:55 a.m., while Iran's final warheads were still being shredded by Patriot fire grids, the death warrant for Tehran's entire missile network was officially approved at U.S. Central Command. Look at this terrifying efficiency. America does not wait for damage assessments. America does not wait for meaningless diplomatic explanations. The moment radar confirmed the enemy attack trajectory, Operation Steel Requiem was activated. This was not a proportional retaliation. It was a surgical excision of Iran's every aggressive capability. A living surgery, performed without anesthesia, 100 miles away at sea. The supercarrier USS Gerald R. Ford received a flash alert. The message was brief but carried the devastating weight of destruction. Authorized immediate retaliatory strikes. Targets: all enemy missile facilities and launch sites, weapons free. Within minutes, the flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford became a living hell for the enemy. The EMAL's electromagnetic catapults worked at full capacity, launching 60 F/A-18E Super Hornets and F-35C Lightning IIs into the night sky. Each aircraft carried 4 JSOW glide bombs, 2 HARM anti-radiation missiles, and air-to-air missiles for self-defense. That's nearly 300 high-tech guided weapons on the Super Hornets alone. That is enough firepower to turn any city into ash, and that was just the opening act. At Al-Dhafra itself, where smoke from interceptor debris had yet to settle, 16 more F-35A Lightning II stealth fighters took off. These ghosts carried Stormbreaker smart bombs, ready to hunt down every mobile target from dozens of miles away with millimeter precision. But the true nightmare for Tehran came from the distant horizon. 4 B-1B Lancer strategic bombers, the supersonic monsters of the sky, received their targeting data while loitering over the Arabian Sea. With 96 JASSM-ER stealthy cruise missiles in their bays, each B-1B is a mobile death sentence capable of erasing 24 strategic targets simultaneously without ever entering enemy radar range. And deep beneath the cold waters of the Persian Gulf, 8 Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines went into action. The vertical launch tubes opened. 160 Tomahawk cruise missiles left their rails, tearing through the water's surface and forming lethal smoke trails headed straight for the Iranian coast. What is the disparity in warfighting philosophy here? While the adversary used 52 missiles hoping for a miracle, America responded with a firestorm of over 1,250 precision weapons. America does not strike to send a message. America strikes to ensure the enemy can never send another message through force again. This is a war machine lubricated by technology and absolute resolve. Tehran signed its own death warrant with its arrogance. And now, the Steel Requiem is falling with the full weight of a superpower. Welcome to the performance of calculated destruction. Before the first bomb even touched the ground, the U.S. military performed a frontal lobotomy on Iran's entire defense system. This is the moment when the art of electronic warfare speaks, turning the enemy's most advanced equipment into harmless toys. At 4:05 a.m., while Iranian air defense commanders were still struggling to explain why 52 of their missiles disappeared from radar after just a few minutes, darkness enveloped them. Not the darkness of the night, but the darkness of absolute technical blindness. 12 EA-18G Growler, electronic warfare aircraft, the wizards of the sky, closed in on the coast. In an instant, every enemy radar screen became a mess of useless white noise. Their air defense systems, the very things Tehran once advertised as impenetrable and formidable rivals to all stealth aircraft, suddenly became blinded blocks of iron under the night sky. This isn't just an attack. It is a technical humiliation. The S-300 batteries, or the homegrown local clones that Iran once bragged about, are now nothing more than expensive ornaments in the desert, awaiting execution without any capability to fight back. Look at that helplessness. In the middle of an electromagnetic storm, Iranian air defense commanders scream in vain as their million-dollar equipment becomes useless. They are standing there, naked before the absolute electronic power of a superpower. The Americans have proven that if you cannot see us, you cannot touch us, and you certainly cannot survive. Following close behind the jamming was the nightmare known as HARM. 128 of the latest generation AGM-8, 8 EAARGM, anti-radiation missiles were launched. They don't need a guide. They simply sniff out radar waves and home in like frenzied hounds. In less than 120 seconds, Iran's early warning network within a 300 kilometers radius fell completely silent. Broadcasting stations were blown apart, and control centers were fried by electromagnetic energy and fragmentation warheads. Now, the Iranian sky was an open door, and the American giant was stepping through with a sledgehammer in hand. The surgery was a resounding success. Iran's military nervous system has been completely severed. No communication, no radar, no unified command. The entire enemy military is now just dead cells, twitching in despair before the actual rain of steel falls. This is the face of modern warfare. One side possesses see-through-the-dark technology, while the other is groping in a dark basement awaiting the scythe of the Grim Reaper. America didn't just blind them. America stripped away their right to fight. Tehran's arrogance led them into a trap where even surrendering becomes difficult because there's no equipment left to communicate. Enjoy this terrifying silence, for it is the prelude to an explosion that will rock the entire history of the Middle East. But remember, the wrath of a superpower never stops at the ruins of the present. The Americans are conducting a root and branch purge. They are erasing the future of an entire missile nation right under the blazing night sky. While the dust from the military bases has yet to settle, 12 B-2 Spirits, multi-billion-dollar stealth ghosts, have silently penetrated deep into the enemy's heartland. These ghosts do not need the darkness to hide. Their technology simply turns every enemy defense effort into a cheap joke. The targets this time? The production facilities in Isfahan and Parchin. This is where Tehran has spent decades and billions of dollars building their dream of hegemony. But under the sights of 120 Stormbreaker smart bombs and JASS-MER missiles, they are all just static targets awaiting Judgment Day. Every assembly line, every expensive piece of machinery used to build missiles has been turned into twisted heaps of scrap. America is not just destroying their weapons. They are destroying the very capability to build them. The adversary will not be able to produce a single missile for decades to come. A total technical and industrial erasure. And when the venerable B-52H stratofortresses appear in the sky, that is when the symphony of destruction reaches its finale. 384 GPS-guided bombs rain down like a storm of judgment on 12 logistics airfields and 10 refineries supplying fuel for the missile program. Look at those massive pillars of fire. They burn so intensely that seismic sensors recorded earthquakes with magnitudes up to 4.5 on the Richter scale. This is no longer war. This is a brutal military deprogramming. Look at the numbers to see the savage disparity. 52 Iranian missiles in exchange for 1,250 American precision weapons. Over 3,500 enemy military personnel dead, while the United States suffered 0 fatalities. 20 major military bases and 55 supporting facilities have been completely erased. The entire missile program that Tehran spent decades carefully constructing has turned to ash in less than an hour. That is the price of daring to touch the dragon's tail. A total, humiliating, and irreversible collapse. 4:33 a.m. A mere 48 minutes since the first enemy missile cleared its rail. Look at the clock and feel the brutality of time. In less time than it takes to play a single half of a football match, a nation lost the entire strategic military potential it spent decades building. Operation Steel Requiem has concluded, but its aftershocks will rock Tehran for centuries to come. The adversary's 52 missiles, their final hope to challenge American hegemony, transformed into the most expensive joke in history. 49 were shredded in mid-air. The 3 that slipped through caused nothing more than negligible scratches on the armor of the American superpower, in exchange for 15 lightly wounded U.S. personnel. The adversary paid with the lives of 3,500 soldiers and the total collapse of its ballistic missile program. This was not a war. This was a message written in fire and steel. America has proven to the world that the gap between a regional power and a global superpower is not measured in miles, but in technological supremacy and the will to annihilate. 1,250 precision weapons rained down like a purifying storm. 20 key military bases turned into pits of ash. 10 refineries, 8 command centers, 30 radar stations, and scores of missile factories were literally erased. Tehran wanted a Pearl Harbor, but they only received a death warrant. The arrogance of the leaders led their military into an inescapable meat grinder. Any attempt to rebuild will take decades and hundreds of billions of dollars. But the belief in their strength was permanently shattered in those 44 fateful minutes. Now, as the gun smoke drifts away over the Persian Gulf under the rising dawn, a cold reality remains. Never touch the dragon's tail of the United States. Never mistake restraint for weakness. Because when the American hammer falls, it does not stop until the enemy is nothing more than a historical footnote on stupidity. The lesson of Steel Requiem is simple. When you challenge a superpower, you aren't just betting against their military, you are betting against your own existence. 48 minutes to erase a missile empire. 48 minutes to redefine the world order. What do you think of this brutal American retaliatory power? Would any nation dare to repeat this mistake? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to witness more displays of ultimate military might, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We will be back with the most breathtaking war scenarios. Victory is ours.